The Blitz and Rapid World Championships took place just after Christmas in Saudi Arabia. I'm going to report on the World Rapids in my hangout on Thursday the 11th of January, 6 p.m. UK time, don't miss it. But first of all, I wanted to look at what happened in the Blitz. Well, I'm sure you know by now that the winner was Magnus Carlsen, and I'm going to take you through a few of the highlights of his tournament. So first of all, the very first round, I should say there were 21 games played. So a long tournament over 2 days. The time control, 3 minutes on the clock, both players. And the players got 2 seconds each time they made a move as well. First game, Carlsen with white against strong Russian grandmaster Ignatieff. Here Carlsen played rook takes b7 check. That should be a winning move. For example, if rook takes rook, then bishop takes rook check. Discover check here. And now white simply transposes down into a winning endgame. He's a pawn up here. He can take on f7. This is good enough to win. Or you could play g3 as well. But bizarrely, after rook takes b7 check, Ignatieff met this with knight e3 check, illegal move. And Carlsen met that with king d3. Okay, this is really bizarre. Whereupon Ignatieff claimed a win because Carlsen had played an illegal move. Now, there was claim and counterclaim and protests. Finally, Carlsen was awarded the win. Rightly so, in my opinion. But I think that game obviously unsettled Carlsen. In the very next game against Sugirov, Carlsen with black here. Well, Carlsen has a good position. For example, if he exchanges here, rook takes, and then exchanges on f4, and just drops the bishop back to d6, then this dark squared bishop doesn't have an opponent. No dark squared bishop for white. Points in the direction of white's king. It seems to me that with the two bishops and white's king looking a bit vulnerable, then black has good chances here. Instead, Carlsen played a positionally correct move, putting the bishop on the outpost, but that simply lost a piece to f5, a shocking blunder. The bishop has nowhere to go. Carlsen took that pawn, but of course that allows queen h5 check, and white was simply a piece up. And Carlsen lost. Terrible defeat. And somehow Carlsen never really got into a rhythm. And you know, he was making tactical blunders. For example, against Wang Hao from China, Carlsen with white should probably just trade on g6 here and put the queen on h6. Well, objectively he's not better, but you know, white is fine here. But instead, Carlsen played queen h6 straight away, simply allowing bishop takes pawn. And now you can see the bishop is immune because of the pin. So black is just simply a clear pawn up here. Incredibly, Carlsen held that game, made a draw, but you can see he wasn't in good form on that first day. He managed to scrape a 7 out of 11, but that put him behind the leaders. So going into day 2, he had a lot of work to do. He changed his strategy in day 2. He played far more solidly in the openings. He wasn't afraid to play, for example, in this game against Mamedyarov. He played a very solid Queen's Gambit declined and managed to equalize the position. Well, you can say that Mamedyarov has slightly more activity because of his strong queen. But you can see it's a symmetrical pawn structure and must be level. But Mamedyarov was kind of pressing here. Queen d7, he's hoping for a favourable endgame. But Carlsen plays solidly, rook e7. Mamedyarov put the queen back, holding the tension, and Carlsen was happy to repeat. So he's not pressing things. But Carlsen was playing very, very quickly. That was noticeable in this second day. So Mamedyarov is trying something. He's squashing these pawns on the queen side with b5. But that pawn could be vulnerable. Queen e5. Now Carlsen starts to take, well, not control, but reminds Mamedyarov that things aren't perhaps going completely his way, because that pawn on b5 could be en prise in some circumstances. And Mamedyarov plays queen d7, imagining he's still better or trying to push the advantage. Probably a mistake, because now Black's queen gets activity against the king. And rook e5, Carlsen trying to activate this rook. So if that pawn is taken, well, the rook is en prise, of course. Oh, it's not so clear, actually. After this, here, both sides still fine. But of course, after queen a7, I think rook b5 looks suddenly very dangerous. So Mamedyarov has to be careful, and he dropped the rook back to d1. But now you can see Carlsen has activity. And yeah, it's clear that Mamedyarov has misjudged the position. He doesn't want to fall back passively with a move like rook a1. However, queen d8 check. He played queen d5, trying to hold things together with tactics, but he's overlooked Carlsen's tactic of rook e1 check. Obviously, if that rook is taken, then the queen drops. If king h2, well, lots of good moves. Rook h1, 2 good moves. That wins the queen, or you can, of course, take on f2, and that wins as well. So this was what Carlsen was doing in day 2. Wasn't spectacular, but he got in a real groove and was playing games his way, how he liked to do, with his style, outplaying his opponents. I've selected maybe not the most spectacular of his wins. I mean, that game against Mamedyarov wasn't spectacular, but it shows Carlsen's style very well. This was played in round 19 and effectively decided the championship. He's playing against a young Russian player, Vladislav Artemyov, who's just 19 years old. It's unusual. Well, now Carlsen, at the age of 27, is encountering players much younger than himself. So the boot is on the other foot. So not easy to deal with these players, but Carlsen did this game with style. Queen in a very nice position. We've got, well, no great imbalance in the position. The only advantage that Carlsen can claim here is that his queen is more active than Black's, and maybe you could say, well, he's gained a bit of space on the king side, but that's not significant at the moment. But Carlsen tried to use that. He played h4. So the squeeze is on. He wants to put that pawn all the way to h6 to set up a mating net. Artemyov activates the knight. Looks sensible. Queen c6. Breaking the pin. Now, obviously, if queens are exchanged, then that pawn is going to go through. So queen a7 from Black. I mean, maybe he should simply play knight c5 here. The ending is not to be feared. But queen a7 also doesn't look bad. The queen might be able to activate. A check from Carlsen. And check on this diagonal. And his idea is very clear. Just wants to put that pawn on h6 to set up nasty mating threats. Now, Black is probably still okay here. Queen a4 is probably the most annoying move from Carlsen's viewpoint. Looking at that pawn on g4. But, this is still not completely clear. Black still has to think, what does he do about this? Instead, Artemyov took on h5 and blocked with h6. Well, very understandable. Doesn't want to allow that pawn to march further, and, that pawn could become weak. The king could be exposed. But now Carlsen takes control. Queen c6, hitting that pawn. Queen on a superb square here, and looking at all these loose points in black's position. And great move from Carlsen. The knight comes round to this fantastic square, f5. And you can see Blitz is all about momentum. Carlsen playing quickly, his piece is going forward, and suddenly this is a horrible position for black to defend. In fact, Artemyov, I think, does very well up to a certain point. This knight blocks out the queen and can sometimes threaten a counterattack. Queen c1, but Carlsen plays excellently here. Hitting h6, a check from the queen. That's blocked with f3. Now, incredibly, black is probably still okay if he simply gives up this pawn and just tries to keep active with his queen. I mean, in a blitz game, this would be impossible to grasp that you're still okay here. Artemyov just blocked out the queen with knight g5, but now queen c6 is an absolute killer, because obviously if the queen moves, then queen takes h6 and queen takes knight. So black has to trade, and this endgame is completely winning. Black has to stop that pawn. Carlsen's knight is in the absolute dream position, looking at the pawn, also controlling the g7 square, so not allowing black's king to come into the game. In fact, you can see that with those squares controlled by the pawn and the knight, black's king is in huge trouble. And now all Carlsen needs to do is to march his king over to stop that pawn advancing, and it is game over. I thought Carlsen's play in this game actually was really, really impressive. It's all about the initiative, all about momentum, and here he doesn't rush it. He doesn't take on h6 until it's absolutely necessary. Just kept control, make sure his king's in a beautiful position first. And obviously black is completely lost here. He needs to keep hold of that h-pawn, but now the knight swings over here. Artemyov resigned. That pawn is dropping. Black is completely lost. Carlsen had a brilliant second day. He scored 9 out of 10. He really found a groove. And that meant he won the championship with 16 out of 21. A point and a half clear of Karyakin and Anand in second and third place with 14.5 points. So Carlsen finished the year very well indeed, and he does invest a lot of time and effort into these Blitz and Rapid World Championship and other tournaments, so he takes a lot of pride in that. Means a lot to him. So if you want to find out about what happened in the Rapids, then do join me for live hangout on Thursday the 11th of January at 6 p.m. UK time. Thanks for watching.